What's up, y'all? It's Drewski, and I've teamed up with Mountain Dew to produce a hilarious new basketball podcast called The Dew Zone with Drewski. Learn the backstories of your favorite ballers and celebrities like Jamal Murray.
Did you have like a favorite team? Was it the Raptors at the time or no? Was the Raptors even started around that time?
Come on, bro.
I ain't that old, fam. You talking like I'm 50.
Taylor Rooks, Asia Wilson, and many more. You won't want to miss this. Listen to The Dew Zone with Drewski on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
Yo, good. Morning after a tough loss. Obviously, we didn't record right after that game for obvious reasons. It's always nice to record with a clear head. So I have a lot to say about the game. I'm sure you do too. But like the sky is not falling this morning, and it shouldn't be from any of your guys' perspectives either, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it is for a lot of people.
Maybe we can talk them off the ledge over the next hour or so.
That tends to happen, I think, after big games in general. I mean, this game, obviously, in particular, is the loss to the Lakers can lead into playing the Lakers in the first round of the playoffs. Maybe not, by the way. I know a lot of people are sort of just thinking it's going to happen, but we'll talk about the chances of it happening at some point in this episode as well. So people are just kind of freaking out in that way because it's sort of... It's the Suns' luck. The Suns have had bad luck over the years, so they're looking at it as we finally make the playoffs. Now we're playing the defending champs who could potentially be fully healthy in the playoffs. And I think that's a fair thing to be a little bit concerned about. I've been concerned about it for a few weeks now. We've talked about it on episodes on YouTube, in this podcast, whatever it is, on Twitter. We'd like to avoid them in the first round if there's any possible way. So we'll see if it does end up happening. There's only 1 week left in the season, Sam. We're getting close.
Yeah, and I really kind of just want to hit the skip button here and fast forward. Even so, they're playing some good teams this week. Actually, they're playing a couple teams that it's like, look, the Lakers are probably going to be our first round matchup, we can say now. Like, it's really probably an 80-90% chance at this point.
Okay, no. Well, let's talk about that.
Okay, all right.
If the Suns are locked in the 2 seed, which I think they basically are at this point, right?
There's
like a 90% chance, right?
There's like a 9 to 10% chance. Supposedly, this is all according to the big data people over at 538. There's like a 9 or 10% chance that they could still leapfrog Utah for the 1 seed based on win probabilities, team strength, data, all that, yada yada. It's probably not going to happen.
So if that happens, if the Suns are in the 2 seed, that means that they play the winner of 7 versus 8. Right now, that would be Warriors versus Lakers. Are you convinced that the Lakers are a guarantee to beat the Warriors in a single game format like that? I'm not really convinced of that.
No, absolutely not. I'm not convinced at all. But I mean, it's the defending champs. The thing is, like, the Warriors are actually kind of the perfect team for from our vantage point for them to take on because Curry's shot variance, I mean, the leaps that he can take in any single game are so high that he could absolutely swing a game and win against them, but they're still going to be underdogs. I mean, it's still probably like, again, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, but a 60-70% chance for the Lakers in that game, I would guess. Like, don't you think?
I'm not sure. I genuinely am not sure. The reason I'm not sure, obviously, Steph Curry, I don't think that the Lakers have a distinct officiating advantage that the Lakers tend to have against other teams when they're playing against the Warriors, because the Warriors are also sort of a premier franchise in the NBA, and they have superstar, one of the biggest superstars in the NBA as well. So I just don't feel like they have that specific advantage. And just like you said, that the Warriors are, like, Suns fans will become instant Warriors fans for that specific game because playing against the Warriors is a better situation, especially if that means the Lakers end up against the Jazz. Because for those who don't know, just once again to recap how the play-in will work, the 2 seed will play the winner of 7 versus 8. The loser of 7 versus 8 will play the winner of 9 versus 10. And then that team that plays So the loser of 7 versus 8 versus the winner of 9 versus 10 will play the 1 seed. So the Lakers, if they lose against the Warriors in the 7 versus 8, the Suns play the Warriors, and then they could win against whoever comes out of Spurs Memphis, I think is what it is now. And then that team would end up against the 1 seed. So I'm not fully convinced. Like, I just want to see it play out first. And it's tough for us. Like, we're trying to plan a playoff preview episode for this podcast. And it's going to be a drastically different analysis, I think, if the Suns end up against the Warriors instead of the Lakers. And the Lakers still have a very small chance, but still have a chance to end up the 6th seed. And then it would be either the Trailblazers or the Warriors in the first round, which is not that different as far as the Suns, because they're just they're similar teams, but drastically different than the Lakers.
I'd point out, by the way, so much has changed since we released that video on YouTube of like what's the ideal playoff seeding. This was last week that the Suns should want. You got to focus on the first round, obviously. So we're going to talk a lot about the Lakers, and getting through the Lakers just that much is going to be a bitch. But let's say you do get past them for a second. It's looking increasingly likely that the Clippers are locked into the 3rd seed too. I don't think Denver's going to catch them. I mean, they could. There's still a chance, but it's increasingly looking like the Suns will have the hardest road in the playoffs. It's like a Lakers first round, Clippers second round type of thing, which is just like makes the idea of a deep playoff run for this team start to sound like it could be something that's legendary if they pull it off. But it's going to be very, very difficult. We're not going to catch any breaks, probably.
Yeah, and the Nuggets aren't much of a break in that scenario with the way that they're playing right now. Anyways, obviously Jamal Murray being gone affects that team, but Michael Porter Jr. is averaging like 25 points per game since that happened, and they seem to have not even lost a step in any way. So they're playing really well too. So it's that's the thing about the West is it's tough. The Suns are still the 2 seed. The Suns have still won more games than all of those teams outside of Utah, who tends to not really scare us in any way, and even still would not be matched up against us until the Western Conference Finals. So it's a weird thing where if the Lakers do end up against the Suns in the first round, I mean, does that automatically makes the Suns the underdogs? Maybe the first time ever that a 2 seed is an underdog in that matchup. Is that right?
I would have had to do the research. I don't know. Certainly, they were talking about it on the NBA TV broadcast last night. They brought up like this is that Knicks team that sparked like Ewing theory. I was really young at that point, so I didn't watch those finals live. But that was like '99. Was the first 8 seed to go to the finals, right? The Heat last year, obviously, or they were the first ones to win. The Heat last year were the first 6 seed in a while to go to the finals. Although I think
but they were never favored. Like a lot. I mean,
no, they were never favored.
Picking them, but
they were. My point is, they were just bringing up like those teams alongside this Lakers team of being like, they've got like normally you discount lower seeds, but not this year for obvious reasons. I think there's another was Dirk's Mavs.
Yeah.
Were they a high seed? I can't remember. I shouldn't talk about this without having done the research. I think they were
the number 1 seed, and they lost to the We Believe Warriors, as they're
called.
Oh,
no. I meant the Mavs that won in 2011.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't remember
that they were
seeded.
I thought they were somewhere 5 through 8, but I could be totally wrong.
I feel like they had home court. But maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I don't remember that. What a legendary run that we've just forgotten about. I mean, that's like the best example of what the Suns could do. Like if you're going to draw any parallels to the Suns making it to the finals, it would be with that team, because it would be sort of Chris Paul's last chance to do it, which in a lot of ways that was Dirk's.
And Jason Kidd's.
And Jason Kidd,
Jason Terry's and Sean. That team is fucking old.
Tyson Chandler. Yeah,
I'm looking at him now.
Yeah, that was a great team. Yeah, the Suns are a lot younger. That's a good point. But this week was interesting, even outside the Lakers. We're going to get to that, of course. But there was an overtime win against Cleveland that I thought was just fascinating. Another good week for Mikal Bridges, but that was like the main game where we really saw how he could affect a game in a fascinating way. Close all game, went to overtime because Okoro just did everything he possibly could as a rookie. And then they showed their youth a little bit there, and the Suns just demolished them. I just wanted to at least shout it out in this podcast because we didn't record after that game, and Mikal was amazing in that game, and it was really fun. It ended up being a really fun ending to that game. Did you have any thoughts on that one?
I mean, it was really just the Mikal Bridges takeover, and overtime is the only thing that I think has lasted keep in mind it was a week ago now, so it's not exactly fresh in our memories anymore.
Yeah.
Mikal in general, man, he's riding a streak of 8 straight games in double figures for scoring right now, and not just double figures. Like, a lot of these games are 15 plus points for him. He's averaging 17 points per game in the month of May, 59% shooting from the field. He's hitting his threes, and in that game, obviously we've talked so much recently about Mikal Bridges with the flashes of mid-range scoring and self-created stuff that's so appealing, because you kind of think about projecting towards the future when you see that. But in that Cavs game, he wasn't dominating on the ball. He just took over defensively, made a bunch of impactful steals, deflections, blocks in overtime, shut down Okoro when he needed to, and then hit the right corner threes at timely moments. And just doing that, he basically single-handedly led the Suns to victory in overtime.
Yeah, a fascinating one, and just one of those games that you'll just remember for being the Mikal Bridges takeover. And that was really fun. And I think that schedule loss against Atlanta the next day, there's nothing really to learn from that. One thing I will say about Atlanta is that the Suns have a soft spot in their defense that Atlanta takes advantage of, and I think Cleveland did too, to be honest, and that's teams that can make that sort of 15-foot floater sort of off dribble. The Suns struggle to defend that because they play a drop defense, and Ayton is very good at tagging the roll man on pick and rolls, so you tend to shut down the lob threat there, and that's a very difficult shot that Trae Young has mastered. So teams that are good at making that sort of short floater will take advantage of that specific soft spot in the Suns defense, especially when they're good at drawing fouls the way that
I was about to say, people want to complain about the officiating last night, whatever, we'll talk about it, but I mean, Trae's like the best in the league at baiting people in that specific spot. Yeah, he sucks. He's annoying. He gets you on your back. Yeah, I mean, he's great, but
he's tough. So good. And that was, even if the Suns were rested in that game, I think they would have struggled a little bit with that specific team, just because of that. Obviously, there's ways to game plan around that, and there's not actually a lot of teams that will do that against the Suns in the Western Conference. Like, James Harden is also very, very good at that specific shot, and you're not going to run into him in the West anymore. Steph is pretty good at it, but that's not where he's focused on scoring. So if the Suns end up against the Warriors, it's a whole different, a trapping game plan, most likely against the Warriors, force the rest of the team to beat you in that case. Mm-hmm. But the next two games, I think, they're sort of, to me, they go hand in hand, right? The Knicks and the Lakers. And the reason the Knicks and the Lakers games go hand in hand for me is that they're both incredible defensive teams that came into these games very, very focused with a game plan specifically designed to attack the Suns. And the game plans, I think, were incredibly similar. But the difference between the Knicks and the Lakers is the personnel. The personnel is drastically different. The Lakers have Anthony Davis, and the difference, what they did, just to sort of recap it and set the scene here, is they trapped Devin Booker. They made efforts to take the ball out of Devin Booker's hands as much as possible, and that forces the rest of the team to beat you. With the Knicks, when they're trapping Devin Booker, generally the two best defenders are trying to be on him at all times. What I think the Lakers do that's pretty fascinating is they don't really put Anthony Davis on ball that much, and that's the main difference. So when you're trapping Devin Booker in that case, that means that the sort of free safety, the extra defender that's sort of prowling, is Anthony Davis, and that's a massive difference between the Lakers and the Knicks, and I think that's where the Suns struggled. In the Knicks game, they found ways to really exploit that, which I think you can do against the Lakers as well with the proper game plan, but the Knicks game, it ended up with a sort of late blowout for the Suns after a couple of defensive adjustments were made. But that's how I look at both of those games.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, really the difference there, I think the Suns were mostly doing similar stuff on offense. I want to give the Knicks credit. Actually, they weren't at all, but it's kind of nuanced. So I'm thinking about how I want to get into it. I want to give the Knicks credit. They did a fantastic job of denying both Paul and Booker's shot attempts in general. So, I mean, the Lakers did a good job too, but in that game, the Paul and Booker combined for only 25% of the Suns' field goal attempts. If you can take the two lead ball handlers on the opposite team and hold them to only a quarter of the total shot volume, that's amazing. It's just proof that the trapping worked. But I think where the game started to break down for the Knicks as the game went on. The Suns just did a fantastic job of it's a cliche to say, but the best offense is or the easiest offense you're going to get is through good defense. You got to get stops. And so it was really when, I'm glad you mentioned the defensive adjustment, the tactical move by Monty Williams to begin trapping and in some case hard hedging Derrick Rose and other ball handlers on the Knicks, but mostly Rose, in the second half of that game is what turned the game around. And once the Suns were able to get those stops, they were able to get out in transition. The Suns, they're not a fast-paced team, but when they do get out in transition, they're a very efficient transition team. I mean, they've got Mikal Bridges, they've got, in theory, Cam Johnson can spot up on that wing. I know he's been struggling as of late, but they've got guys who can be useful in their transition offense. And so they were really able to just start breaking down the Knicks. They scored 38 points in that fourth quarter and held the Knicks to only 17. It was, I think, one of the biggest success stories from a tactical perspective that we've seen from Monty this year, just in terms of talking about how resilient they were.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking about that floater area. Derrick Rose is also very good at that. And that's actually a good example of a player that also has hurt the Suns over and over and over again with that little short jumper, short floater. And you saw them do something different in that. And I thought what was interesting is they were doubling Randall if he caught the ball below the three-point line just immediately on the catch, and then still finding ways to trap. And that's like an ultra aggressive defense that teams don't always employ. Teams that do employ that, the Raptors, a Nick Nurse coach team, the Heat tend to do that a lot. And then the Lakers, we saw them do the exact same thing with Devin Booker. So it was a very similar thing to that. And I thought, yeah, you're right. A good adjustment, but it takes really smart defenders to do that. And you kind of hope that the other team makes bad decisions moving the ball around, which the Knicks did tend to do, and the Lakers just didn't. The Lakers just continually played very well against any sort of defensive adjustment. Anthony Davis, the Suns were doubling him in the post or in the high post, and he was they were moving the ball in the right way.
Yeah,
and that's what the Suns struggled with.
So are we into Lakers conversation now?
Yeah, let's get into it.
How we've officially transitioned. Like, that's where I start to get frustrated. I mean, I want to preface by saying I want to talk people off the ledge. Offensively, what happened last night doesn't really concern me whatsoever. I think we've heard people say something to the effect of Monty didn't want to show his cards from a million different people yesterday on Twitter. But I think all of them who said it are like, that's exactly what happened. Our friend David Nash obviously was tweeting about it. I know he already rewatched the game and was looking specifically. He's done in-depth breakdowns before on the Suns' elbow set. That's when they have the two bigs at the elbows on the court and the two players in the corner. You can I'll post it on Twitter. You should know what I'm talking about by now. But the Suns were not they just weren't running a lot of their usual sets on offense. And I am inclined to believe that is more likely to be a situation of Monty not tipping his cards towards the opposition, giving them free scouting, essentially, a week before a potential playoff series. Because it is one thing to scout a player off your laptop screen or a projector or whatever in the locker room. It's another thing to get the scouting
100%.
in front of your eyes and get to really practice your processing speed in terms of reacting to what they're doing. So I think, it's likely that that's what was happening with the Suns, not that they suddenly switched their strategy. Offensively, we can talk about all sorts of things that they did do on offense and what concerns us and what doesn't, but I'll just say off the bat, what happened offensively last night does not concern me. Defensively, though, there were a lot of concerns. And I think the reason the defense concerned me and the offense didn't is because when you talk about the defense, it comes down to more of just a natural, inherent physical advantage that the Lakers have. Anthony Davis, it helped that he had one of the best games of his season, and the Suns just did not have an obvious answer for him. You talked about how they were trapping him. The traps they were throwing at him were pretty weak. And the execution was consistently pretty terrible. So we can get into it, but stopping them on defense is kind of going to be the bigger challenge and the bigger thing that I take going forward.
Well, I mean, one of the things that the Lakers did really well on traps is just pick on Devin Booker's man. Because what happened in a lot of cases is Devin Booker was on the weak side.
Yes.
And he just shaded off of his man too much. And he
So-
tends to do that. He's a ball watcher. They move the ball 2 or 3 times. Find Devin Booker's man, whoever he's supposed to be guarding. And he's got an extra 1.5 foot of space compared to every other player. And that's that's the type of thing that you watch on film that can be corrected.
That's one of my big things. I mean, it was just the fact, they did a great job on Randall the other night. In this game, though, Anthony Davis had 5 assists. All 5 assists were to 3-point shooters.
Yeah.
So he alone, it was a pick your poison throughout the night, because we say that they trapped Anthony Davis, but if you go back and watch the game, because I didn't watch the whole game, but I watched at least. I really wanted to key in on where Davis was touching the ball and what he was doing with it. There were significant stretches of the game where the Suns were just trying to guard him with single coverage. Didn't matter who it was. It could have been Frank Kaminsky, could have been Torrey Craig. Predictably, those guys were eaten alive. But then he also had 5 assists to 3-point shooters. All 5 of those assists were exactly when you think they would be, when he got trapped in the post. That's 15 points created. And as you just mentioned, a lot of those cases, I don't remember how many exactly, but at least 2 or 3 of them were to Devin Booker's man, because he was not in the right place off ball. So, the big thing is double. If you think the double is going to work for you, it's going to be harder to double him in the post with LeBron James, that's for sure. So that's another thing we got to scout. But if the double is going to come, it has to be animated. It has to be energetic. It can't just be like this kind of weak, I'm here, but I'm not really here type thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's fair to say, hey, the Lakers made a lot of tough shots that they don't usually make. I think that is totally valid if you want to take that away from last night's game. They are, as a matter of fact, 21st in the NBA in 3-point shooting percentage. So, I'm not necessarily worried that you go into a series and KCP and Wes Matthews and a couple other guys, can't remember anyone else at the moment, are going to shoot 40+% for the entire series. That's fair if you don't think that's going to happen. But they got to do a much better job of getting out and contesting shots. They didn't execute last night.
Yep, I agree. And we're talking about Monty saving stuff. I agree that was happening to the point that Torrey Craig still started. Like, they didn't even start Jay Crowder in this game. Jay Crowder actually, if you look at plus minus, I know how that works, and I know some people don't like it. But if you look at the plus minus alone, the Suns were not outscored when Jay Crowder was on the floor. And I think he's still on a slight minutes restriction, so that's part of it. But I also think they still could have started him to try and show their cards a little bit more, and they didn't. They still started Torrey Craig. That's not going to happen in the playoffs. I can tell you right now. Jay Crowder will be starting for this team in the playoffs, especially if it's against the Lakers when they need somebody to match up against LeBron. Hopefully not 100% LeBron, where Jay Crowder might have somewhat of a defensive advantage compared to a normal game. But yeah, I think what's especially tough, like, do you think, Sam, that there's any chance that the Suns do try to go big against the Lakers? Because I think one thing that they do that is tough, it just makes them especially tough, is that they're starting Drummond right now with Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis ends up with a guy on him. He takes a lot of contested mid-range shots, which is sort of what you want, but he makes a lot of them. The thing is if he misses them, right, if you want DeAndre Ayton guarding Anthony Davis, then you have Andre Drummond on the other end collecting that offensive rebound.
Of course.
And there's not a lot of teams that pose this specific problem.
I know.
It's not just that they have another center on the floor capable of getting the offensive rebound. It's that they have one of the best rebounders, if not the best, in the NBA collecting those rebounds. Oftentimes I talk about rebounds as a stat. Offensive rebounds are different. Those are killers. Like, that's an extra possession. That's as important as it can get. And if you have DeAndre Ayton guarding AD, which is probably the best matchup for the Suns, especially if LeBron's on the floor and you can't put Jay Crowder on AD, then they're getting those rebounds. Do you think the Suns even should just sort of maybe put Saric on AD or on Drummond there? They're both AD, funny enough, and then DeAndre Ayton on AD. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know what to do with Saric these days. To be perfectly frank, to be perfectly frank, Frank played a lot last night. That's kind of sorry. That's had to do it. That's kind of 25 minutes for Frank Kaminsky these days is a lot of time.
Yeah.
So they were doing that. Andre Drummond, here's what I'll say. He doesn't scare me as a basketball player. his IQ, his basketball IQ, that is just he doesn't scare you. His pick and roll defensive IQ, and he also shot 2 for 7 last night. But he does one thing better than like anyone else, and yeah, that's collect the offensive rebound. And so it doesn't worry you if the ball goes back to Drummond, but if he just tips the ball back and gets another possession, and LeBron and AD are on the floor, I think. What do you think about this? Because some people brought it up last night. DeAndre Ayton matchup on Anthony Davis throughout the game. Is that what Monty is going to do? And then, I mean, either you start Jay Crowder on Drummond and try to somehow box it. It's not going to work. Or you bring in Kaminsky pretty quickly. I mean, the issue is all of the potential running mates next to Ayton in that scenario have some sort of flaw, whether it's inability to protect the rim or inability to get the rebound or whatever. There's a lot of potential issues. And you run the risk of putting Ayton into early foul trouble on AD if he's single coverage.
Okay, so in that case, is Mikal Bridges is guarding LeBron, right? That's sort of the
good point.
It's tough, man, because LeBron is very strong.
No, you're right. Mikal can't guard LeBron, so it's going to be Jay Crowder on LeBron,
and then Mikal on Drummond. Here's what I like about
we
that.
match up so bad against this team, and look. We need to start talking about offense soon, because the offense I'm not as worried about. So we need to talk about that, because I feel like we're too much doom and gloom right now. But defensively, this is a very bad matchup.
Let me go over that scenario.
Yeah.
Here's what I like about that. Is if you can find ways to force the ball to Drummond and they sort of force them to try and attack that mismatch, that actually benefits the Suns in a lot of ways, because that's not good offense for the Lakers.
They're not going to. Anthony Davis and LeBron, you know, Davis was really good last night, but like a lot of his offense is still going to be, ironically, it's kind of the thing he's a much, much more refined offensive player than Ayton. So understand that when I'm about to make this comparison. But Anthony Davis would rather take a contested 18-foot mid-range jump shot over two guys than pass the ball to Andre Drummond in those sorts of situations. So I don't think there's any sort of situation where like the ball is getting funneled to Drummond. I don't think that's something you could do as a viable strategy.
Well, yeah. I mean, in that case, maybe they find ways to take him out of the game and attack in other ways, because, yeah, I think you're right about that. I think that the Suns should start. I don't think that the Suns in any way should go to a big lineup to start any series against the Lakers if they are matched up against the Lakers. Agreed. I think they need to start with their best 5 players, which includes Jay Crowder on the floor, Mikal Bridges on the floor. So that means that those two guys are at the forward positions, and you start there and you see what happens in that scenario. You find, maybe you put Mikal Bridges on AD to start and see if he can just bother him enough to force him into shots that he does not want to take, and see where you go from there. And then you have Jay Crowder, and you just figure it out from there. You have DeAndre Ayton in that help defense position.
Yeah.
And maybe you give up some offensive rebounds in that case, and you can adjust as the series goes on. But I think you need to start with your best 5 players, the players who are playing the best together at this point of the season.
Yeah, I think you just kind of put Ayton in sort of a loose role as just a constant help defender, understanding that he can't leave Drummond like wide open in the dunker spot, but he can kind of leave him like, you'll put Crowder as your primary defender on LeBron. He'll do his best. You have Mikal Bridges front AD in the post and kind of have Ayton come from behind if he gets that post positioning, and then someone's going to be in the corner, whether it's probably. It depends where they're situated on the court, but either Booker or Paul, whoever's left over, can come over to tag Drummond underneath the rim, and that's going to be your best chance. And you just got to hope that not too many offensive rebounds go to Drummond, but you're probably going to give up a lot of offensive rebounds that way. Man, it's just there's no easy solution here.
Yeah, there really is no easy solution, but they could do a lot better defending that 3-point shot. Like, that would have made a huge difference. The level of concern with other guys on the floor was high enough that, like, Anthony Davis could have shot. He scored 42 points, his season high, one of his best games of the year, and that could have happened, and the Suns could have still won had they defended the 3-point shot a little bit better. There was just too many open shots at that point.
Ben McLemore, by the way, was the other guy I was thinking of earlier. Like, I couldn't even remember who their 9th or 10th man was off the bench. Yeah, it's like him and KCP and Wes Matthews. I think it was KCP hit some ridiculous shot where the Suns double covered AD really well for like pushed him out to where he was like 20, 22 feet out with a few seconds left on the shot clock. And then he just turned around, he pitched it back to KCP, threw up a wild 3, went in. This was in like the late third quarter, put the Lakers up by like 20 points. And I was like, yeah, they're hitting bullshit. It's over. Like there's just, there was some stuff that there was nothing you could do about it last night. But again, the difference between this team and the Clippers is the Clippers are a 42% 3-point shooting team. They're the best corner 3-point shooting team, I think, possibly of all time. Don't quote me on that, but they're very close. Like, they just have shooter after shooter. If you come to double Kawhi and Paul George, there will always be an open shooter in the corner. That's how the Clippers play, and so they'll destroy you with that. With the Lakers, you can afford to send heavier help at their superstars, and if Wes Matthews is going to beat you in a playoff series, and Wes Matthews is going to beat you in a playoff series. But last night they shot 43%. They're not going to do that for an entire series, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be a tough... No matter what you do, it's going to be tough. You just have to be very, very, very disciplined in order to defend a team this well. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about offense and then some of the games that are coming up now to close out the season. We'll be right back.
The economy is made up of real people doing real stuff, and it affects everything. Which you obviously know since you're a real person doing real stuff. Marketplace is here to help you get smart about everything beyond the what of the day's business and economic news. We dig into the how and the why with the real people driving our economy. From big tech and interest rates to small businesses and what's happening at the Fed. Marketplace breaks it all down so you don't have to. Listen to Marketplace wherever you get your podcasts.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Thomas Hearns. Legends, whose four-way rivalry defined one of the greatest eras in boxing history. Relive their decade of dominance in the new Showtime sports documentary, The Kings, a 4-part series premiering Sunday, June 6th, only on Showtime.
Okay, Sam, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about the offense, and I think that's a conversation we should get into now. We talked about it. They didn't show their cards, right? They didn't do the things that they normally do in this specific game as often as they normally do them. So I think that was a strategic plan by the Suns, just in case they do end up matching up against them in the first round. But what is it specifically that stood out to you that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, from an individual standpoint, let me just say first, Cam Payne was amazing. He was amazing. Yeah. I don't even know if there's any analysis to say there other than he was just lightning in a bottle last night. And we've been talking about when he had a career high. So it kind of sucks that his night was taken away, ripped away from him like that. But
let me just say, to add to that, a career high for him. He's also insanely efficient on the season. He's only averaging something like 8 points per game on the season, which his impact is so much far beyond that specific metric. That's why box scores are useless. But a 59% true shooting percentage as a guard, and about half of his shots this season have come completely unassisted. That means that on a team with Devin Booker and Chris Paul, he still has found a role creating his own shot consistently enough that he is an absolute threat off the bench, and to be able to do that all and still have a true shooting percentage that's almost 60%. Is just insane. It's one of the best. He's been one of the best bench players this season. We talked about early on. We talked about 6th man of the year. Dario Saric was making a case for himself. That fell off a cliff at some point this season. But Cameron Payne, the guy that we were most worried about, the position I think that we were the most worried about at the beginning of the season, has been consistently great for this team, doing something that other players cannot do. And if you look at the future for this team, if he's signed to back up Chris Paul again next season, that's a potential 6th man of the year in the future. I think he's been insanely good.
Yeah, might be. He's still pretty young. He could get better, and he still continues to add tricks to his bag. I mean, he had a couple of step back threes last night. That again, it was like people. It didn't feel like people were too excited about it watching online, just keeping up with what people are saying on Twitter. we kind of had the wind out of our sails at that point. I mean, we were down by like 18 when he went on his crazy run, and then he basically single-handedly brought the Suns back to within like 10, right? And then was taken out for Devin Booker, who had a bad game. But yeah, I just want to start off this segment, I guess, by shouting out Campaign. He's going to be crucial in the playoffs.
Sorry,
Yes.
I know you want to talk about other things though, but I think
I don't
that
want to
what
talk
you
about
said-
how Booker was bad. I want to talk about good things first.
Well,
If that's where you want.
I do want to talk about Booker though, because I think he found ways to be efficient in ways that he's going to need to do in the playoffs. But
Okay.
Cameron Payne also in this game perfectly showed the importance of being able to shoot when guys go under your screen. This level of playoff defense, when they're fully locked in like this, there are times where guys are just open behind the three-point line after dribbling a few times, and to be capable of shooting that shot consistently is vital for this team, and it's something that he's going to have to take a lot of those in the playoffs because a lot of other things will not be open, and to be able to hit a pull-up three-pointer when guys go under on screens is going to be important. It's nice that he has that in his bag, and there are times where if Devin Booker and Chris Paul can start hitting those two on a consistent basis in the playoffs, which they haven't necessarily done this season, but there are times where they can do it over and over again in good games.
I think
That's gonna be huge.
I think Campaign is no doubt a better pull-up three-point shooter than Booker at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like-
I'm not sure what the stats are, but I imagine that it is better. I mean, he's shooting 51% from three in the last 10 games. Yeah. So he's just been on
I
fire.
think it's just obvious. Like, this guy might be your best pull-up three-point shooter, and we talk so much about how important that is. Before we get to Booker, we will talk about him. Mikal Bridges. It becomes clear and clear every game. I know we already talked about his impact in that Cavs overtime, but Ayton is going to be a defensive X factor for the Suns of the playoffs. Mikal Bridges is going to be the offensive X factor, and that is because as more and more teams wake up to the fact that they want to trap Booker and Paul, and they want to get the ball out of their hands, someone else needs to make reads. Someone else needs to make plays. Monty talks a lot about the idea, usually when he's referring to bigs, he talks about guys like Frank and Dario as like connective tissue. That's what they are for the offense. They get to the middle of the floor. They can drive to the basket. They can put the ball on the floor, but they can also pass out. They can, make reads, and that's kind of connects the offense all in one way. Well, Mikal Bridges, he needs to play that role in the starting lineup. And over the past 10 games, we're really seeing him do that. There were plays last night. I posted one on Twitter this morning where it was just like a set that you run for Devin Booker, where you had Chris Paul playmaking from the post. You had Ayton set a pin down for Bridges, who came up to the top of the key. While he was doing that, I think Dario Saric was on the court, and he was cutting towards the basket. Defense got a little bit confused. Ayton set a really good, strong screen. Bridges comes around, takes one step, rises up for the mid-range. But while he's doing that, Booker is in the corner, just sitting there. And it's like it's a total role reversal of what we're used to seeing out of these two guys. You're used to seeing those sorts of plays, pin down set for Booker. He does his thing in the mid-range while Bridges is just there in case a three-point shot opens up in the corner. To see that Mikal can kind of do that in the rhythm of the game and look really comfortable doing it now is going to take a huge load off those other guys for the Suns. It's going to be massively important. He also had 4 assists last night. A couple really good finds to Ayton. I think one even kind of driving towards the basket in a pick and roll scenario. The more that he can add this stuff to his palette, he's just going to be huge. And we can't have a contract conversation right now. It's too early, but like in the playoffs,
You make your money in the playoffs.
You make your money in the playoffs, and if Mikal averages 15 points and 3 or 4 assists per game in the playoffs, which based on his recent play, it looks like he's totally capable of doing. And if he continues to do it not just by hitting spot up threes, but by doing some of the fancier stuff that we're seeing, he's definitely going to earn his money. And more importantly, though, the Suns need him to do that if they want to win games. That's the big point here, and it's looking like he's capable of it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the double-figure streak. How many games was that now that you said he scored?
I think 8 in a row, and I think also like 11 of his last 12 or something at this point.
Yeah, I just want to shout out the fact that the traps are a big reason why that's happening. Devin Booker being forced to get rid of the ball out of his hands, and Chris Paul he doesn't always shoot, right? He's going to find the next guy in that ball rotation, and that's commonly Mikal Bridges. And if they're trapping and Mikal Bridges catches it at the 3-point line, if he's open, he's going to shoot it. But commonly, there's a defender that's out of position that's sprinting back to try and contest his three, and his ability to attack that closeout. And, whether it be playmaking, which I think he's gotten better at, finding DeAndre Ayton in particular, who's, most of his field goals are unassisted, so he needs that, or shooting that mid-range shot, which is, I haven't looked up the stats recently, but I imagine that his mid-range stats are like completely off the charts at this point, because I just feel like he never misses that shot, whether it be from 11 feet or 17 feet. It just seems like that goes in very consistently. But I just want to say that he's able to do that, and he's needed in that way because of how Devin Booker has been defended. And, the conversation of Mikal Bridges and what he's doing and Devin Booker and his scoring sort of going up and down in specific games are very, very much connected, because what happens is they just overplay Devin Booker in a lot of ways. As soon as he catches it, 2 or 3 bodies are coming at him, and he's forced to get rid of it pretty quickly. If he can back up and reattack, he will try. And I think in the Lakers game in particular, he struggled in the first half. And I won't say that the efficiency struggled, because he just didn't shoot a lot. So I think that it's tough to measure efficiency on a low number of attempts. And in the second half, he found ways to use their level of aggressiveness against him. I think he ended the game with 13 free throws. And that's exactly what he needs to do, especially in a game like that where the refs are clearly trying to blow their whistle as much as possible. And, he ended the game, I think, with 21 points on 14 shots or something like that. Still ended up a very efficient game. But I think this shows the importance of having a game plan like that before the game starts rather than adjusting on the fly, because you can get in a deep enough hole that once you find ways to be effective, once you find ways to be efficient, it might be a little too late in order to catch up and actually win the game.
Yeah, that's a more optimistic view than what I have right now, I would say.
What is your view?
I mean, if we're talking about Book, so much of his game speaks for itself. The finishing with either hand speaks for itself. The mid-range, where he's extraordinary. I think it's a good point that you brought up. 13 free throws last night. Very impressive for him. He doesn't usually get to the line that much. But without the threat of the three being where we want it to be, it's not that Book is not a great player. He is a great player. But I mentioned something last night about how the best players, the types of players that it takes to beat the Lakers, the defending champs in a series, can rise above a double coverage to an extent and just make difficult shots. We've seen him do it before. And I'm not saying he can't do it in a playoff series, because just before this game, I think he didn't play super well. He didn't play super well in the next game either, but just before those 2 games, he had 4 straight games of 30-plus points on like 55, 60% shooting every night. So we're going to get great games out of Book in the playoffs. But it's just, I did see a lot of blame put on Booker for last night, and I kind of agree with it. I mean, yes, he was trapped. Yes, it is difficult to navigate offense in the trap. But at the base level, like, Mikal Bridges can only step up so much. Even DeAndre Ayton can only step up so much, and certainly he could step up a lot based on what we saw yesterday. I think we should talk about him next. But if Booker doesn't make the tough shots, the Suns don't go anywhere. At the end of the day.
I want to push back on this right away, because you're saying that the players that it takes to beat the Lakers are... I want to know who you're talking about when you mention the players that you're talking about, specifically the 3-point shot, because I just don't agree with that.
No. I'm not talking necessarily. I mean, he shot 5 for 14 yesterday, and he only took 1 3. So it wasn't just the 3. I'm talking about Devin Booker is an all-star caliber player, but is he, I mean,
is he who?
You need a top 10 player. You need
but who are you talking about?
You need a Kawhi Leonard type scorer. To who's like a pure triple threat from, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be. You need a guy who is just really amazing at one thing. Like, it could be a Steph Curry level scorer.
But I don't think that the Warriors have a chance against the Lakers in this specific. That's why I want to push back
the rest
on
of no, Mike. But okay, you're getting defensive. It's because the rest of the Warriors suck. I'm saying.
Well, no. Here's why I'm pushing back on that, because I think commonly people will say, we need Devin Booker to do this or that, like other players who do that. But then they never point out those other players because those other players, against them as well.
other players are every first option who's won a championship in the past 20 years, except for like the 04 Pistons. It's
Right.
Booker not being a top 20 guy, but maybe not a top 10 guy. That's what it is.
Okay, I can see the argument for that. I just always think it's more important to. I just don't like when people talk in vague. They just get too vague in these conversations, and I think it's way more important to be specific because if you're too vague, it's not actually analysis. I think it becomes a little bit of like these Sports Center
Colin Cowherd.
cliches.
Yeah, I get it.
Yes, and I don't think it means anything at all when people don't get specific about this conversation because I think
I'm not saying.
me
Let be clear. I'm not saying Devin Booker is not an alpha. I don't know if he has the clutch gene. I'm just saying like, I wish his game was a little bit more consistent from night to night.
I think if you're talking like Kawhi Leonard is a good example. If you're talking about can Devin Booker do what Kawhi Leonard did for Toronto in the playoffs offensively, and I think he absolutely can. Like I just don't know that the game needs to be boiled down to the Suns would be better just if Devin Booker hit more pull-up threes. Would that help? Yeah, but I also think that there are elements of his game that are going to be vital in the playoffs, and I think too many people will judge based on this Lakers game alone. It's just not analysis. I get frustrated when it's just not analysis.
I'm not judging on the Lakers game alone. I'm judging on the fact that he's, like his handle could be tighter too. Look, this is in no way did I intend for this to become a shit on Devin Booker fest. It's just
here's what I'll say.
There are weaknesses in his game that will be exploited.
What do you think he could have done specifically? Because I have thoughts too against the Lakers that would have made him specifically more effective in that game.
I'm kind of just saying that it's up to the law of variance. It's just about difficult shot making. There's nothing tactically that I think he could have done differently yesterday. Although I'm curious to hear your thoughts of what you think he could have done differently because nothing stood out to me.
Well, there's specific things he can do on traps that I think would help. Moving the ball faster on traps and then immediately trying to relocate a la Steph Curry. So off-ball movement. So there are times where he catches the ball, the trap comes, and what Devin Booker's become very good at is navigating a trap because he has ways he ball fakes commonly, right, to another guy, and that gets the second defender to drop back a little bit, and then he'll sort of do the drive around guys into the middle of the floor, and then his ability to create from the middle of the floor is where he's able to attack those specific traps. Now, sometimes he can get to the rim, sometimes he'll pass out to guys. I think there was some fumbled passes to DeAndre Ayton that you need to find ways to better get him the ball. I also think that other players need to find ways to come out to create essentially a passing lane for Devin Booker when he drives. Because what happened in the Lakers game is 3 defenders were surrounding him at that point. The only passing lane he had was to DeAndre Ayton on a bounce pass, which is not really, as we've learned, is not the most effective way to get him the ball. So finding ways to get rid of the ball a little quicker and relocate. And then the second thing is exactly what he did in the second half, was using their aggressiveness against him. What he did commonly, and I think this is to the point we made earlier about the Suns not doing their regular offense here, is when he's coming off sort of a horn set or like he's able to catch the ball sort of in that mid-range area and then attack in that mid-range area, he got fouled a lot. So they waited until the second half to make that sort of adjustment to get him the ball in those areas instead of behind the three-point line. And getting fouled a lot, I think, will make a bigger difference for him being like, he still had an efficient game. It's just you force the ball out of his hands enough. It's up to other guys to make shots. I still think that.
If you're looking in pure efficiency terms, Chris Paul didn't get to the free throw line once. So, if you want to argue about contact avoidance, Booker's not your biggest issue.
Yeah,
but
he
will still have games in the. I will just point out he will still have games in the playoffs where he runs into heavy help at the nail and turns the ball over 5, 6, 7 times. He will do that.
Yeah, and that absolutely will happen. And in a sense, he's nothing like Chris Paul in that way. Although Chris Paul was the one with 5 turnovers in this specific game. It was a game for Chris Paul. We don't talk about him because he's oftentimes just does not make mistakes. But I think in the games where the Suns have struggled the most, it's often when Chris Paul is not making his most difficult shots. And that's another example of what you talked about with Devin Booker, and we've talked about it all year, ultimately, when the defense is ratcheted up to the highest level, a lot of how good the Suns will be based on how often Chris Paul and Devin Booker make really difficult shots in isolation. And in this game, Chris Paul did, and he had 13 points on 13 shots, and he had 10 assists. Like, it's a weird time where I feel like at some point in this game, I thought Chris Paul's not having a very good game, and then I look at his assists, and he has 9 assists, and it's like, well, he is still doing something here, but the 5 turnovers is tough. What did you think of Chris Paul against the Lakers?
He was fine. He didn't stand out. There was one stretch, I think, maybe in the second quarter, I can't remember anymore, where he kind of hit the isolation shots, the mid-range pull-ups that we're used to seeing. Other than that, he was not. He did not really boost the Suns' offense in any noticeable way to me, beyond what he normally does. Not that he didn't do anything at all. I want to talk about Ayton. Can we talk about Ayton?
Yeah.
You mentioned people have to come up and give Booker. They've got to give Booker a passing lane. 3, I cannot wait to see the discourse online from NBA Twitter if DeAndre Ayton goes into a playoff series and averages 6 points and 6 rebounds a game.
Right.
And that's not to say that he was horrendous last night, because actually I think it's the contrary. Ayton only took 3 shots in the game. His first shot was like a couple minutes in. Then he didn't attempt another shot until the middle of the fourth quarter. But when he did, I think it's so important to stress this. It's not that the Suns weren't trying to feed Ayton the entire game. It's that he flipped a switch and he came up and made himself available. And there's very much a facet of that game of being able to do that people don't recognize. Like the last couple of attempts that Ayton had in the game, one where he just demanded the ball from Mikal Bridges, who's on the perimeter, gave him a post touch, and he just went to work on Andre Drummond, put a spin move right into him, put his elbow in a little bit, tucked it in, and then went up and under. And Drummond is that guy where you can toast him in the post like that. Ayton, he's not going to be your primary or secondary, maybe even tertiary offensive option in the playoffs. We don't know. He's not going to be a guy you want to take 15 shots per game necessarily, unless they're right at the rim, created in the flow of the offense, pick and roll offense like we saw in the Knicks game. But in games like this, he needs to find ways to go and get himself a touch beyond just getting an offensive rebound, because he was invisible for a lot of the game, and I don't think that was necessarily the fault of Paul or Booker.
No, and credit to the Lakers, I think. Defensively, I thought they did a really good job. The Suns actually did outscore the Lakers in the paint, I think, in the final score of the game. And the Lakers just hit more shots, more difficult shots, and that's kind of what led to a win for them. But I think you're absolutely right. It's a level of focus for him, and I think in this, and we didn't talk about the refs. Like we don't necessarily have to. We'll talk about it on Twitter. We often don't talk about them on the podcast.
I'll just say, here's what I'll say. You are much more anti-ref than me. So if you want this to be, look, the refs made bad calls last night. I definitely think that. I also think that the Suns have been really bad, and we've talked about it all season long, have been really bad at generating contact and getting to the free throw line. And the Lakers play Anthony Davis at power forward. If you play a series against this team, it's not just the fact that they're in LA. It's also the fact that they're built to get to the free throw line and you aren't. And so every single game, we should expect that the Lakers will have more free throws than us. Does that mean that there weren't bad calls? No, there were definitely bad calls. 29 fouls on the Suns is ridiculous, and there was a whistle every 30 seconds last night, it felt like. Especially the Suns average, I looked it up, the Suns average 19 fouls per game. To get 29 was the third most they've had all season, and in the only 2 games where they had more fouls committed than that, they lost both of those games too. So it's really hard to play a good game of basketball when the officials are gonna call fouls on you that many times. But you have to prepare for a certain level of physicality from the Lakers. Like they're gonna get you, they're gonna work you in, and they're gonna get you to line a certain amount. And I think it's fine to say, oh, the refs are dicking us over. And they swung the game if it's like a 5 or 6, 7 point game, if it's like a few possessions. But when you're down 20 in a game, that's not the refs. There are things that you can do to get back in the game that it's your fault and you need to take ownership over those flaws. So I think there's 2 sides to it.
I completely agree in that if the Suns play against essentially anyone in the playoffs, the likelihood is that they're going to shoot less free throws than the other team. But it's how they play. And the offense tends to work the best when the game is not stopping over and over again. So they prefer that it's sort of more of a flow than this constant stoppage of play because of free throws. But look, there is a history of the Lakers getting more calls than other teams in the playoffs.
Than other Pacific Division teams in the playoffs,
yes,
yeah.
It's not like it's completely out of the question. So that's something that we're going to have to talk about during the playoffs. But before
I hate that I know I will be looking up the official assignments before each game in the playoffs and like analyzing the stat. I think there's a place where you can look up ref stats for each person.
Yeah.
That sucks. I hate that I'm going to do that. I know I'm going to do that.
They're behind a paywall, by the way, which means I guess
Really?
we're going to have to pay for that. Yeah.
I did not see the things you don't know when you don't make the playoffs for 10 years.
Because
I would
never.
never
Before.
I would never use that for a regular season game because like who gives a shit?
Yeah.
But now if Chris
It's
Paul
for
is
gamblers.
going, yeah.
It really is. It's for gamblers.
If Chris Paul is being officiated by Scott Foster, we already know that. We already know.
There's a slight disadvantage already, and it could be a huge disadvantage at some point. But I tried not to talk about the refs on the podcast because on the podcast we try to focus on analysis. But there is one thing that is analysis when it comes to the refs. If DeAndre Ayton gets in early foul trouble, it throws him off for the game a little bit. And in this game, he got in early foul trouble. He had 2 quick fouls. One of them was very soft. And I'm not surprised that he ended the game with a lower box score stats than a regular game because of those early fouls in the game, because I do think that throws him off a little bit. Obviously, the early minutes affects it just in general, and maybe he ends up with less minutes in the overall game because of that foul trouble. But I think commonly it just throws him off a little bit in the game. So the Suns need to find, and this is why we talked about what they could do to start games, and that's not necessarily go big right away with Ayton on AD, assuming they end up matching up against them in the playoffs. But it's just you have to find a way to avoid those fouls. I think some of the fouls they called in this game, they're not going to call in the playoffs, especially some of the ones Caruso was getting. That's the type of foul that they just don't call in the playoffs. Lots of the refs that have been around forever, they've seen the league for a long time, they just don't call those specific calls. So I think it will be different in the playoffs, but you have to find a way to keep DeAndre Ayton engaged throughout the game. And obviously the playoffs will be a little better because everyone's going to step up a little bit. But I think avoiding that early foul trouble will help a lot with that.
Remember when we talked a week or two ago, I can't remember anymore, but about those flash cuts to the middle of the floor for like Mikal Bridges, he flashes and he gets the ball, makes an easier entry pass to Ayton who gets a lob. We talked about that for a reason. The reason I want to bring it up, Anthony Davis, I think I counted like at least 2, if not 3 dunks that he got last night off of doing exactly that with like Alex Caruso. So it's not just something that the role players do. The absolute best superstars at the big man position in the NBA need a little bit of help from their teammates. But it's important that the nuance in the discussion is it's important that that doesn't just fall on Paul and Booker, because if Booker's getting trapped around a screen, there's not much he can do to chuck a 30-foot, lob to Ayton, who's all the way at the rim. This is where Mikal Bridges comes into play again and is very important. Continuing to make those types of reads and those high IQ plays is going to be super important at involving himself in the mid-range area, but also involving Ayton. It's something that the Lakers do. It's something that the Suns can emulate.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they get DeAndre Ayton involved in that specific matchup, because I think there are ways, and they just didn't do a lot of the stuff they normally do, like we've been talking about throughout this podcast, and I think there are ways to get him involved. And like I said, that early foul trouble is something that they really have to avoid. It throws them all off. And we've talked about it time and time again. He's going to be needed. Like, we're going to need him to play close to 40 minutes a game probably in the playoffs in certain games, because there's no one else on the team that does the things that he does, specifically on defense, but also even just screening on offense. Like, he's the biggest body that you could put out there to set screens for the guys that we need to be effective in the playoffs.
I cannot believe how much time we just spent analyzing the offense in a game where Monty threw it intentionally.
Well, there's still.
It was all in the plan all along. So who cares?
The Lakers are a very good defensive team. Like
Yeah,
even when the Suns are running the plays that they run, it's going to be tough. And you're adding, and we're not even talking about the fact that LeBron James didn't even play. LeBron, if he's healthy, is not just one of the best offensive players of all time and one of the smartest offensive players of all time. He'll memorize every single one of your plays that you're running against him, and he can be that disruptor defensively as well, especially if they find ways, which I think they will, to have LeBron and AD's just sort of roaming off the ball and just sort of fucking everything up that you're trying to do. That's what they're going to do. So it's going to be tough. And, so that means that we do have to analyze it. But yeah, you're right. It's going to look completely different. And I think in a lot of ways that I think, not to insult people, but like an average fan doesn't really pick up on the plays that they normally run, or even defensively, the schemes. Like they went to a zone quite a bit in this game. I'm not sure that they're going to do that against the Lakers in the playoffs. Things are just going to be dramatically different, right?
Yeah, you need to be a weirdo who's like a basketball weirdo online in order to pick up on specific sets and whatever. You need to
Those
be really
people suck.
I mean, they kind of do. No, it's you need to be like really interested in that stuff, and I never would fault anyone for not being interested in that stuff. But those people who do pay attention to that, the Suns will have different tricks up their sleeve next week or a week and a half from now, whenever it would be.
So the last four games: Warriors, Blazers, Spurs.
I don't care. Let me tell you right now.
Yeah.
We don't care. No.
Well, here's I think the interesting part. We're going to finish the season and not know who the Suns are playing in the first round of the playoffs. That's just going to happen. So that means these 4 games, whatever happens, happens. The Suns seem to be, like I've said, locked into I think they only need to win one more game and they get the 2nd seed. They're not going to drop below that. So assuming they do that in the next few days, then we'll know sort of where they are. They still have a chance to catch the 1 seed, depending on how Utah finishes the season. It's just the most likely outcome is the 2 seed. So at some point, maybe they'll rest guys. There's no real reason, especially a back-to-back on the Spurs to end the season. There's no reason to play the guys in that last game. But then we have to wait till the play-in order to know who the Suns are playing. So we're going to come back next week. We're going to have an episode that sort of talks about the end of the season. But once the play-in is over, then we're really going to dive into some playoff analysis. It might be repeating a lot of the stuff. We're really drilling down on some of the stuff we talked about if they end up against the Lakers. But it could be different. Could be any one of those teams that's still lined up in that play-in. Anything else before we go here, Sam?
Time to have some film sessions, probably. I'm probably going to have to spend a lot of the next week just like really watching the Lakers. I hate that that's the likely matchup, but it is, and we got to be prepared for it.
And it'll look a lot different, but we will be back soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hopefully we talk some of you off the ledge a little bit.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Thomas Hearns. Legends, whose 4-way rivalry defined one of the greatest eras in boxing history. Relive their decade of dominance in the new Showtime sports documentary, The Kings, a 4-part series premiering Sunday, June 6th, only on Showtime.